Hello, and welcome to Millennial Anti-Terrorizers. And today we're going to be talking about military order of movement, military accidents, and deaths in the military that are non-combat related. Okay, so today I think it's been 2 days since the commercial airliner had struck the Black Hawk helicopter, resulting in the deaths of all on board of both aircraft. So that's in the news that it's been 15 or 16 years since the last commercial airliner accident. And so we're going to be talking about that and a little bit other things. Brody, have you been in any helicopters before?
Yeah, a Chinook and a Blackhawk. Chinook more than Blackhawks. I've only been in a Blackhawk one time.
Okay. When you got on, did they give you like a safety briefing, protocols, or anything like that before you got on?
Yeah. But you can't hear them, so I didn't have one of those. Like everyone has, like that's important, has those helmets and shit. When I got in, I didn't have any of that kind of stuff. So they were like giving hand signals and stuff. I don't know what they were saying.
Okay.
Right.
Did you have any training beforehand on how to disembark the helicopter?
No.
Oh, okay. So you were just kind of taking rides. Got it. Got it. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Beth, have you been in a helicopter before in the military?
I've not been in them, but I have been around them. I used to be around the Hueys and the Cobras a lot. That's kind of what was near our fuel station the most. But yeah, I wasn't really in them. Didn't get to have those adventures.
Okay. So I was in a helo company, which is for the army, it would be a helo assault. So we had a little bit more training before we ever went into a helicopter. The majority of the helicopters, like Brody, was Chinooks. There was some Sea Stallions in there, CH-53 Sea Stallions, which is a heavy helicopter. Uh, One opportunity to be in a Black Hawk, and I was being medevac from the 28th Cash Unit to Baghdad before I took a C-130 transport. And it's a little bit different than the other helicopters because in the other helicopters, you disembark from the rear. But in a Black Hawk, obviously, you disembark from the side with the side doors being open, which is kind of nerve wracking when your head is right at the edge of the helicopter and you're flying and you're just strapped down in a gurney or a litter, and it wasn't that fun. I like to be enclosed or encased, but it makes sense to de-ass from that sucker if it hits water or something like that. So it's unfortunate nobody made it out of the helicopter, and no survivors from the plane crash. What had happened is there was an active duty Black Hawk that was doing its standard training with lights out and night vision. And apparently, from reports right now, it sounds like the air traffic controller was doing two jobs at once, which there is a shortage on aircraft control people right now. And apparently, the helicopter was making multiple erratic movements at the time and worked its way in the path of the planes that were landing at Reagan National International Airport. And this is kind of a big deal for the media, so they've been talking about it. When I was with the 13th MEU, there was two helicopter crash landings. One was a Chinook and one was a CH-53 Sea Stallion. And basically what they did from the heavy crash landings was they d- folded the front spoke of the helicopter when they went nose down, and on each aboard I believe one person broke their femur, and I think that was the most serious accident in those crash landings. Luckily the helicopters weren't that high off of the ground. um Brody, did you see any other accidents in the military, people getting injured or things like that?
I mean, besides IEDs, not a whole lot of accidents. We're a small unit, so we didn't have too many stuff. I mean, we had like Abrams getting stuck in the mud, that type of stuff. I blew the engine on a Bradley. Uh, I tried to take an incline one time, and it was beyond like a 65% incline. And that one we backed out of, and I turned my Bradley, and we actually went one track off the ground. And this tiny ass skinny tree, like, I mean, just a couple inches wide, actually was the thing that stopped our Bradley from rolling down the entire hill. And so that was pretty scary. I think the most major thing that was like an accident, though, was in Germany. We were loading up our vehicles onto the rails so that uh, we can get to Grafenwehr, the Germany, which is the training ground for all armor. And we had Lieutenant Badger was getting out of his Abrams, and as he was getting up out of it after parking it on the rail cars, he went to just naturally grab the wire that was above his head, and that happens to be like a high powered voltage wire. And it, I mean, sparks, he basically started on fire immediately. Um, and he did get transported to the States and passed away 2 weeks later. That was the most serious like accident that I think that we've seen outside of like combat. Um, but nothing really serious with any kind of vehicles for our unit as far as like accidents, like running into something or anything like that.
Beth, how about yourself? Do you remember any accidents in your unit or units around you, or at least some scuttlebutt you heard?
I've been around a lot because with Motor T, that's kind of like what we were doing when I talked about in the last video. Our first tour was picking up everything, but even for our own accidents, I kind of hearing Brody's story about like certain terrains we had to be cautious of because of certain um just tipping our trucks over and stuff like that. But I remember kind of like going on a convoy one time and we were starting to take firefight, but this wasn't the enemy. I remember the army had started shooting at us thinking we were the enemy one time. Nobody got hurt, thank God. So there's no casualties. But I remember like up ahead, like some of our vehicles were starting to take fire. And then I just remember over the radio, like our convoy was starting to panic. Like, why are we taking fire when we knew they were our foe and not the enemy? So they come to find out later on that the army had accidentally shot rounds at our security, thinking that we were the enemy coming through when we were just a supply unit getting ready to go through. I think we were at Baghdad or something at the time. So yeah, one of our vehicles got shot up pretty bad, and we had to ended up recovering the vehicle, but thank God nobody got killed in this.
I got a question about that.
Yeah, go for it, bro.
Was it the goddamn National Guard that did it? Because that is not
Probably.
the
I just know.
army.
I just remember the saying "army," and I was like, "Well, go fucking figure." That it could have been National Guard for all we knew. But yeah,
Yeah,
it was just like a simple mistake.
it does happen. It does happen from time to time. Like even
Yeah.
like, I mean, all the shenanigans from Afghanistan, where like mortar strikes were coming in on what is it called, blue on blue or green on green? I can't remember
Mhm.
what it is, but that happened quite frequently in Afghanistan too.
Okay. I was gonna say one more thing too. Like, with that being said, times are really hostile. So even us, like we couldn't fire back, but like even our nerves just being on these convoys during the day before we started shifting to the nighttime, like we kind of understood why they would shoot. Like you're just everything is kind of going on right there and then. So you're thinking, oh, is this who we're supposed to shoot at? And then come to find out it's not. But it's like you're not familiar with their vehicles and their certain types of equipment just yet. Because I remember not knowing what to look for our first tour. So kind of going in, it's like we didn't know who was enemy and who's foe until like people that were kind of there and we were being escorted. They're like, just this is what to look for. And so once you start getting into the cities, that's when we're like, oh, this makes sense. And obviously coming back, you're more like under what's the word I'm looking for? Suggested to what's kind of going on. So it's like you're more prepared.
Yeah, I get that. Even in Afghanistan, like we had issues with so like I know you guys seen the movies and seen what the Taliban drive, like those white Toyota pickups, Hilux. Oh my God, they were everywhere. And I know like the Afghan police officers have a Hilux, but it's like a green truck. And every once in a while though, you'd be in an area that they didn't have those green trucks. And so you'd be going down the road and I was like lead gunner, and I'd see this truck just hauling balls towards you, and they all have like RPGs and like shit, and you're like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be shooting at them. Like,
Yes, I remember those kind of things too. Just like, because I remember, what is it called? Rules of engagement, especially when we're like, I talk about my story, standing towers. It's like, are we allowed to shoot? We have to ask permission, even though we're watching them right there, cutting the fence, coming right through into our base. And it's like, it's so ridiculous. Like, I feel like a civilian sometimes too with that.
Uh, oh my God, there was so many like casualties from stupidity to the push to Baghdad. Two that I can remember with 40 mics. One was Marines in an Amtrak how fired a M203 in the hand of a staff sergeant, and the round spun around on the deck of the Amtrak and never exploded. And, that staff sergeant, he like had to have his hand in a cast for a while. Another one was we were probably a couple days from Al Qut, and this Marine was taking a shit, and apparently 30 feet over or 20 feet over, they were burning the trash out of a Amtrak. And one of the misfire duds, 40 Mike, HE rounds somehow found its way in the trash. So when they just thought they were burning like MREs and stuff like that, it went off. And when it went off, it detonated and it put shrapnel in the Marine who was taking a shit. And I remember when I was in Kuwait, I was wounded from combat, but my three roommates in the 4-man room were all non-combat related injuries. And I thought it was interesting that there was so many wounded in the hospital that were non-combat related.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Physics, really. Expansion and contraction. Oh. All right. Right here. 1, 2, 3, go!
So the round had gone off in the fire that they were burning trash out of this Amtrak, MREs and stuff like that. And when it went off, as kill radius 15 feet and 35 feet or 45 feet is wound radius. So he was within the blast of getting wounded, and he got shrapnel in his ass. And I remember in Desert Storm, they said the majority of the people killed in Desert Storm were non-combat related. And I believe that because when I was wounded in Kuwait, when I was at the hospital in Kuwait City, in a 4-man room, I was the only one wounded in combat. The other 3 were non-combat wounded, like a vehicle rollover, a guy broke his arm, a guy fell off a ladder, broke a leg, another guy was doing patrolling bad. So I mean, it was like, wow, a lot of people are getting hurt. So it's understandable in training, people get killed or wounded a lot.
Before you
Okay,
got cut out
so
again.
the 40
Not editing.
Mike has a wound rate of 5 meters a kill rate of 5 meters and a wound rate at 15 meters. He did not get killed, but he was definitely in the shrapnel range, and he got some shrapnel in his goddamn butt cheeks. Um, there was oh, I forgot. We had a sergeant get killed in a helicopter. What happened was it took off from uh, the palace for Babylon, Saddam's palace for Babylon, and it took off and it air and it crashed in the river. And we had a sergeant of the guard, Sergeant Ski from Bravo Company 1-4, and he went into the river to go try to rescue the crew chief, the two crew chiefs and the two pilots, and he eventually drowned in the river also. It's it's a dangerous fucking job without getting shot at, guys.
Hmm.
I think we should point out too to any civilian watching, we may be smiling and laughing, but that shit is no fucking joke. Like that
Yeah,
shit
it's scary in the
sucks.
moment. Holy
Yeah.
But at the
I feel like
same
that just
time, when you're around it all the fucking time, the only thing that you can deal with that shit is humor. So
Mhm.
forgive
We're
us,
not
you know,
crazy.
we're not
We
we're not
kind of aren't
obsessed
in a
with death.
happy-go-lucky
It just
way.
that's how we have to deal with this shit. Some of this shit's funny. I've laughed when some of my buddies have fucking died. And you know, it's just I don't know how to communicate the difference between someone watching and hearing about the stuff and have never been around it and then being in the moment and I don't know. If you guys can explain it better than I can, I don't know.
No, that's like good
No,
to
you're
say about
absolutely
that.
right. Like talking about it with friends, it's you know, you can kind of laugh about it now, but when you go to board a plane or you're at the airport, like you could smell the fear out of my sweat. You know, you get that fear sweat, that cold sweat,
Oh
you
God,
know?
yeah.
Like yeah, you could definitely smell it on me.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I got a drink. Like I'm not kidding. Like I remember I fucked up. I flew to Tulsa and I drank in Denver and I had two drinks. And by the time I got to Tulsa, I was like, oh fuck, I got to rent a car and drive 110 miles. So I had to fucking chill for a while until I was a little bit more sober. And I was like, holy shit, I'm not getting a fucking DUI in another state. I I was uh I was third in line for the initial push up to Baghdad. And then what had happened was they took General Mattis needed some security, ground security when he was moving around. And so they took two of our Humvees, one with the Mark 19 and one with the tow missile. And they ran security for General Mattis. And when they did that, they took our point, and our point was a Mark 19. And they put me up on point. So I did like 20,000 miles on point out of the 34,000 miles I was in the gun turret. And, you know, like that's a big issue with my PTSD. Like being around other vehicles. Like if I'm on a road by myself, couldn't give a fuck. Zero fucks given. But the minute there's somebody behind me or there's oncoming traffic, even if it's a little county road or something like that, it's like, you know, fucking little pucker factor goes up a notch or two. And fucking, you know, you kind of guide a little bit to the right just to make sure that you're far away from that double line or whatever, you know. It's the same thing with flying. I remember our plane broke down in Vegas, so we had to take another plane to LAX and take a connecting flight to Denver. And nobody told me that LAX, when you leave LAX, you go over the water. Now I'm fine. I am perfectly 100% fine flying over land, because if you crash into the land, you're fucking dead. But if you crash into water, you might drown, you know, and there's fucking sharks in the water. And if there's a plane crash, there's a lot of blood. And a fucking shark can come like 100 miles with one drop of blood in the ocean. So, you know, I'm not fucking with any plane, helicopter over the fucking water, right?
Let's just drive. Yes. I know what you mean now. Because it's like your chances of dying are like so much higher.
Yeah, doing
Hey,
point
but think of
in
it
the
this way, man.
Humvee in the front. So I had it a little bit different because like you were early on, so IEDs weren't like the primary aggressor at that point. But in 2009, I rode point almost every single time we left the gate or the wire. And I still like I have a hard time driving because I can almost not pay attention to like I don't have that issue where cars are around me and stuff like that. That's not such a huge deal. I'm sure like I know Beth has a huge issue with that. But for me, it's the S-shaped pattern that I kind of use to look for IEDs. That's like my primary thing, and I still do it today. Um, first you sweep from right to left to find anything from a far distance, like coming up, and then you do mid, and then you do short, and I'm constantly looking like anything that's on the side of the road, trash bags, um, like around here there's tons of like so they don't have like trash cans that they bring out to the edge of the road for their trash pickup. Normally they use those IBC totes that are cut, and then they open them up and then throw their trash in the IBC tote and close them. And Jesus Christ, those drive me nuts. Like I can literally see myself veering on the other side of the entire road just to avoid those IBC totes. And that's like my primary thing when I'm driving. And I have tried to ride in a truck in the back and being above the cab, standing up. I can't do that anymore. Like
Oh,
there was so much nervous sweat that I gave to Afghanistan. I don't ever want to feel that way again. That was rough.
there you go.
My dad, before he died, I wanted to take him to Vegas and put him on the helicopter ride going down the strip there. And like he wouldn't do it. He was already getting bad with cancer and this and that and everything. But I was willing to get in a helicopter once with my dad because he'd never been in a helicopter and I've been in so many. I don't know, 20 to 30 different helicopters I could think of. And some of them were up to, like 3 hour flights, 4 hour flights going to Arizona, New Mexico border kind of deal. And, at the beginning it was fun, but after there's accidents and, people are getting stressed and that your helicopter has been on a boat around salt air for 8 fucking months. I know the mechanics are working their asses off to keep those helicopters maintained. Don't get me wrong. Okay. But we just left fucking Pearl Harbor. How many of those mechanics got a little too fucking drunk in Pearl Harbor? You know what I'm saying? So, like that last flight off the ship where we went back to Horno, and we just had all our gear crammed on these helicopters because we were leaving the ship for the last time, and we flew over the water for about 30 minutes. I don't know how far off the coast we were, but like that was the last time I got in a helicopter over water, and thank God for that, because it really wears on you that every time you leave that ship you're immediately over water. And in a helicopter they give you rebreathe, or they give you little air tanks that has supposedly
Yeah.
5 minutes if you're breathing slow. If you're excited, you probably have about 2 minutes of water, but it doesn't matter because with that helicopter's going down, you only have so many feet that you can swim up before you get the bends from your lungs. And they teach you're supposed to scream your name when you're going up and everything before you black out. And the more they teach you, the scarier this shit gets. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what it's like being a commercial airliner pilot and sitting in the back while somebody else is flying. Like Brody, you're talking about being on point. I was on point. And you know what? I'd rather be on point than have somebody else be on point, because I trust myself more than I trust one of the junior Marines on point. And it wears on you. Like at the beginning, it wasn't much, who cares? But then towards the end, it's the smoking of the cigarettes increase.
Yeah.
Yeah, shit.
That's why I'm a stoner now, because I'm just like, my nerves can't not do the shit I do anymore. It's the only thing that keeps me okay.
It lingers. It lingers
Uh,
for the rest of your life.
so a little bit more on that helicopter. I wanted to also talk about, like, when we do training, we all had it planned out a month or two before. So I'm assuming with this helicopter flight that they're doing their monthly quota that they have to have so many hours in the air to get their flight pay. So all pilots do this, where they have to get their quota, and their crew chiefs and so on and so forth, if they want to get that flight pay. It sounds like they were doing that. And, like we talked about earlier, like if you're in DC in the military, you're a little bit above the next guy in the military. If you're in the old guard, working at Eighth and I, at Tomb of the Unknown, all these guys are handpicked kind of deals. And I'm sure it's the same thing with the avionics running out of Andrews or anybody flying over DC, for whatever they have to do medivacs or something like that, or they have to bring in troops or something. I'm sure they have to do that monthly. And it's sad that this happened, but accidents happen in the military. We've all seen them. Some are bad wounds, some are death, and it's just the nature of the beast. And I just wanted to thank everybody for watching the podcast today.